Welcome to Brain Atlas, Chapter 3 Movement. So, we will be talking about three types of movements today: voluntary movements, involuntary movements, and complex movements. Voluntary movements are especially done by the skeletal muscles, one of the three types of muscles that exist: skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and smooth muscles. So, there's some vocabulary we have to know. Flexors are the muscles that bring bones together. So, for example, moving your hand toward your shoulder by bending your hand or arm. Extensors bring bones away from each other. So, when you are bringing your hand away from your shoulder by extending your arm. So, agonists promote the movement and antagonists oppose the movement. So, in every single movement, we have two muscles, one on the top, one on the bottom. One is an agonist, promoting the movement that you want to do. Antagonists oppose it, so you won't overdo it and you know when right to stop. Muscle fibers make up a muscle and is controlled by one alpha motor neuron, and an alpha motor neuron can control more than one muscle fiber, as far as 100 plus muscle fibers. The unit of the combination of a muscle fiber and the alpha motor neuron is called a motor unit. Another important thing is the motor cortex, where motor movements are decoded in our brain. This basically sends signals that control the release of alpha motor neurons and acts with the basal ganglia, thalamus, cerebellum, and the brainstem. Next, we're going to be looking at the involuntary movements. So we have reflexes, which are involuntary movements. Reflexes are basically the automatic quick response to a stimuli that is done unconsciously. So it occurs really quickly, and so there isn't time for the stimuli to go all the way to the brain and back for response. It goes directly to the spinal cord and takes immediate action. So there are two types. Stretch reflex has a big process. So first there's the stimuli. Then, so for example, the knee jerk reflex. And then that stimuli is decoded and goes to the muscle spindle fiber neurons, which then send it to the spinal cord. From there, the efferent nerves go to the muscle, and afferent nerves go away from the muscle to the brain. Flexor muscles relax and extensor muscles flex. So basically, the flexor muscles are the agonists, and the extensor muscles here are the antagonists. The stimulated leg extends. Flexion withdrawal occurs when the stimuli, such as the pricking of the bottom of your foot, happens. And for this, the sensor neurons decode the info and send it to the excitatory neurons, which then flex the flexor muscles and inhibitory neurons basically send relaxation notice to the extensor muscles, and so the leg is lifted from the needle or thorn. Here, Golgi tendon organs are really important because they detect how much force there is on the muscle and calculates how much is needed. So, for example, you're lifting this heavy brick, you need to know how much force is needed to lift it, or else you would immediately drop it. And so the Golgi tendon organs adds on force or lessens the force depending on how much force you need to lift that brick. So it makes the impossible possible. Complex movements are another type, and they have two main concepts: spinal circuits and neuronal circuits. Spinal circuits control more complex voluntary movements, and this could be somewhat like rhythmic patterns of our walking. So when we're walking, we have this pattern or steady pace we're walking in. This is controlled by the spinal circuits. Neuronal circuits produce rhythmic patterns in other stuff like our heart rate. So these are also known as central pattern generators, and this helps us recover from after paralysis. So there are a few movement disorders that are important: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and Parkinson's disease. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis happens due to motor neurons dying, and so people lose their ability to move. Parkinson's disease happens as a result of the degeneration of neurons in the substantia nigra, and these neurons control the release of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter controlling reward and punishment. And so, for example, if you eat a candy, it gives you pleasure because of dopamine. Dopamine just decodes it as pleasure, and that's what gives you pleasure. And lack of dopamine means lack of pleasure and lack of inability to move, trouble moving, stiffness, shakiness, everything that's negative, according to like relating to movement. The cerebellum is another main concept in movement. The cerebrum is the core center of balance, and this is crucial to motor learning and coordination. Adaptation is also part of its job, which basically is like you're adapting to the environment. So it allows your body to do tasks that you are thinking like is unimaginably impossible. Like, for example, lifting a brick, as I said earlier. By the look of it, it may look heavy, but and then when you're lifting it, the cerebellum gives a notice to the Golgi tendon organs that you need to put more force, and so it makes it possible. The cerebellum also adapts to our body state, such as if we have gained weight, or we grow taller, or we have an underlying disease. It modifies itself so that what we do makes sense for our body state. There are two other movement disorders now: Huntington's disease and cerebellar degeneration. Huntington's disease is basically this is the opposite of the Parkinson's disease, and this is triggered by unwanted movements like jerks or twitches. So this is caused by the loss of inhibitory neurons. So we know that excitatory neurons are like agonists. They just want this action to happen, and inhibitory neurons inhibit it, like glutamate, which inhibits GABA. So loss of inhibitory neurons basically means it's inhibiting our ability to do work. But excitatory neurons are in a high value here, so it's basically overdoing the work. So if we want to move, it overdoes that movement. Cerebellar degeneration is caused by mostly alcohol abuse, causes this, and this causes poor coordination, inability to walk properly, speak properly, or even see properly, because this all has to do with movement. For example, when I'm speaking, I have to move my mouth, and cerebral degeneration just disables me from speaking. So that's all for movement. Thank you for watching.